What if the most important message in human history has already been sent, not with sirens or fire from the sky or any dramatic interruption of daily life, but quietly, subtly embedded in patterns, timing, and events that appear disconnected until the moment you step back and realize they were always part of the same design? For thousands of years, ancient texts warned that there would come a moment when the world would not end in a single catastrophic instant, but instead would shift slowly at first and then all at once as systems accelerated, as truth and deception blurred together, and as humanity began to feel watched, measured, and divided without fully understanding the source of that pressure. That moment was described not as destruction, but as a signal, and according to the convergence of history, prophecy, and modern reality, that signal has already been sent. This matters now because something in the atmosphere of the world feels different, a constant low-level tension, without a clear enemy. Technology racing forward faster than ethics can follow, institutions losing credibility, and people everywhere feeling restless, anxious, and disconnected, sensing that something is wrong but lacking the language to explain it. This sensation is not random because history shows that civilizations do not collapse suddenly in a single dramatic event, but first accelerating internally, fragmenting socially, and eventually crossing a point of no return so quietly that most people only recognize it in hindsight. Ancient writers understood this pattern deeply, even though they lacked modern language, so instead of satellites or algorithms, they used symbols, visions, and stories to describe repeating cycles of human behavior and power. One of those recurring ideas appears in the Bible through the image of the watchman, who is not a preacher shouting at crowds, but an observer positioned on the horizon, someone tasked with noticing what others cannot yet see and sounding the alarm before the danger becomes obvious. The warning attached to this image is simple but severe, because if the watchman sees the signal and stays silent, the people suffer unprepared, and if the signal is sent but ignored, the outcome is no different. The signal itself is not destruction, but information. Another powerful image appears in the book of Daniel, describing a vision of empires rising and falling, each replacing the last at an increasing pace, moving from gold to silver to bronze to iron, and finally arriving at a divided structure that is simultaneously strong and brittle, powerful yet unstable. Daniel was not naming specific nations, but describing a recurring pattern of power marked by centralization, expansion, and inevitable fragmentation. Now pause for a moment and look at the modern world, where power has never been more centralized and yet never more fragile, where global systems are deeply interconnected but vulnerable to cascading failure through supply chains, energy grids, financial networks, and information itself. We have constructed a civilization optimized for speed, but speed removes resilience, and resilience is what civilizations rely on when stress arrives. Jesus, speaking in the Gospels, warned that the final stage would not begin with visible chaos but with normalcy, with people working, trading, building, and living their daily lives, unaware that something fundamental had already changed beneath the surface. He described a time when knowledge would increase, not wisdom but raw information, spread everywhere while understanding became increasingly rare. That description feels uncomfortably familiar. In ancient times, a signal meant a fire on a hill, a trumpet blast, or a messenger on horseback. But in the modern world, signals are digital, invisible, algorithmic, and silent, shaping behavior without announcing their presence. They influence attention, amplify fear, and guide desire. Modern technology does not merely observe humanity, but predicts it, models it, and subtly influences it. And for the first time in history, human behavior is tracked in real time on a global scale, through clicks, purchases, movements, and patterns. This is not speculation or conspiracy, but infrastructure. Ancient prophecy warned of a system in which buying and selling would require alignment, not necessarily through a visible mark, but through participation and integration into a structure that cannot be easily rejected. A system you do not fight, but accept, because life outside of it becomes increasingly difficult. Look around and imagine trying to exist without digital identity, without financial networks, without connectivity, and you begin to see that the system does not require chains, only convenience. Here is the pattern hidden in plain sight, because every major prophetic warning follows three phases: acceleration, division, and revelation. Acceleration is happening now across technology, society, and psychology, while division deepens politically, culturally, and ideologically. And revelation does not arrive as lightning from the sky, but as a slow realization that the pattern was always there. The moment of revelation comes when people finally see that what feels sudden did not begin yesterday, but decades ago. Some ancient Jewish writings outside the Bible described a time when humanity would build towers to reach the heavens, not physically but intellectually, believing that human systems could replace divine order, not through religion but through control. Today, humanity no longer worships gods of stone, but efficiency, optimization, and security, offering privacy, autonomy, and meaning in exchange. This is why the signal feels unsettling, because it does not appear evil, but logical, helpful, and comfortable, and that is precisely what makes it dangerous. The Book of Revelation is often misunderstood as a story of destruction, but at its core it is a book of unveiling, because the word apocalypsis does not mean end, but revelation, the revealing of what was always present, but unseen. And here is the unsettling truth. The world does not change when the signal is sent, but when enough people realize that it was sent long ago. The warning is not about fear, but awareness, because every historical collapse shares one final trait, where people sensed something was wrong but trusted the system anyway, assuming someone else was watching the horizon. The watchman was never meant to save the world, only to speak. So ask yourself why so many people feel like time is speeding up, why the future feels closer than it should, why old rules feel obsolete while no new rules feel stable, and why it feels less like humanity's under attack and more like it is being prepared. Maybe the signal was never an event, but a threshold, a moment when humanity gained the power to reshape itself without the wisdom to decide why. Ancient texts do not end in despair, but in choice. Awake or distracted, aware or absorbed, observer or participant. The signal does not force action. It reveals position. And now, as this transmission ends, remember this. The warning was never meant for the masses, but for those who notice patterns, who feel the shift, who understand that history does not repeat, but it rhymes. The signal has been sent, and the question is no longer when, but whether you are listening.